Welcome back. So in this video, we're going to talk about CSR and strategy and how they relate to each other. Now, strategy is such a hot topic, but very few people can actually tell you what it is. Okay? There are many, many definitions of strategy. But the one definition we all agree on in management is that strategy is the pursuit of competitive advantage. Stomp 3 times, write that down, it's important. Again, I'll repeat this again. Strategy is the pursuit of competitive advantage. If you'd like to know more about strategy, I've got some other videos on strategy, and you're welcome to view them. But we're just going to talk about it just a little bit here in this particular video. There are 2 approaches to social responsibility and strategy. You've got corporate social responsibility and creating shared value. And generally speaking, it is seen that creating shared value is a socially responsible way to contribute to competitive advantage, and unfortunately a lot of corporate social responsibility programs are seen to be detracting from competitive advantage. But I've made these things kind of seem black and white, and there's actually a lot more gray area in between. So I will talk very briefly about creating shared value. There's going to be some videos on my channel as well, and a lot more depth on creating shared value. I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of creating shared value to serve as a basis of comparison between creating shared value and corporate social responsibility. So creating shared value, also known as CSV. CSV is basically an approach that says, it actually, if you looked at my stakeholder video, it reminds me of kairetsu arrangements, like our Japanese friends do. The idea is that by making stakeholders stronger, you as a firm also become stronger. So let me give some examples of corporate social responsibility in action. You can reconceive products or markets. Let me give an example. Think about the fact that the health food craze has taken over the United States right now. Of course, regular kinds of ordinary food are cheaper and sometimes, in my opinion, taste better, but that's a topic for another day. But supermarkets have managed to convince consumers that they should pay a premium for food that is good for them. So it actually becomes a competitive advantage to sell more expensive food. I mean, that's crazy, right? You are different because you are concerned about the health of your customers. It's an example of reconceiving products and markets. Okay. You can also redefine productivity in a value chain. So part of it could be something like energy use and logistics. Walmart is a great example of this. What Walmart did to contribute to the environment and also save its customers money was completely revamp its long-haul trucking routes. They made the routes shorter and more efficient. So they're polluting the environment less, and they're not having to pay drivers as much money, and they're paying less for gas, and the stuff is getting there faster. So the environment is being saved because Walmart's trucks are not on the road as long, and customers are also managing to get a lower value. So it's contributing their competitive advantage. Walmart gets to have even lower prices because they were socially responsible, or also environmentally responsible in this case. Think of something like resource use. Well, a lot of products during the 1990s, think of like soap or deodorant or these kind of things. Let's use shampoo, that's one of my favorite ones. You'd buy your shampoo from Walmart, Target, Ralph's, wherever you bought it, and it would come in a paper carton. You put the paper carton in your bag, you come home, you take the paper carton, and what do? You throw the paper carton away, and then you use the shampoo on your hair. The paper carton gave absolutely no value added whatsoever to the customer. I don't care about the paper carton. Firms actually started to realize this, and they stopped using the paper cartons. They thought that customers liked the silver or the aluminum foil on the paper carton. They didn't, right? So what they've done is they've saved the environment by not using the paper cartons, and they're saving the customer some money because they're not charging for the paper cartons themselves. Again, kind of a win-win sort of situation. Another example of resource use might be, for example, don't see this much in hotels anymore, but they used to have those little stickers on the toilet paper at hotels when the housekeeping would come. And I'll tell you, what a waste. Have you ever tried to use the toilet paper with a sticker on it? I mean, don't. First of all, just don't do it. I'm not going to elaborate, but don't do it. But, you know, you get the toilet paper, you have to tear the sticker off. In the meanwhile, you've torn through like 3 or 4 layers of toilet paper. You got to tear all that toilet paper off because it's got a big hole in it, and then you throw that toilet paper away just to use a piece of toilet paper because somebody had to put a sticker on there to show you that housekeeping had been through. That as a practice has generally ceased. Now maids will typically come in, or housekeepers will come in, and they just kind of fold the toilet paper down at the bottom and do a little triangle to let you know that housekeeping came through. That's a great example of improvements in resource use that are socially and environmentally responsible. Customers don't like to have to fight with the stickers anymore. They're not paying for the stickers, and you're not throwing away toilet paper that has a big hole in it because you tore your sticker off. Also, you know, this is a good example of resource use. Procurement. In lieu of fair trade products, which I mentioned in one of my previous videos, you know, for fair trade you pay a little bit elevated price in exchange for knowing that the farmers were paid, you know, more for their labor. Nestle went to Africa, taught African farmers the best agricultural techniques. The farmers produce more coffee beans. They can pay the farmers more money because they're producing more coffee beans, while at the same time, because there's more coffee beans in the market, they can charge the consumers less. So it's a win-win situation here. Distribution. Again, that's another great example with Walmart using advanced trucking routes with their trucking fleet, less time on the road. Employee productivity. Actually, the federal government's really good with this. For employee productivity, they'll send government employees to get their master's, MBA, you know, whatever they want to do. And they know when that person comes back, they get an employee who got a little time off from their regular job. They get a little bit of a break, time to recharge. But they come back and they're actually more productive because they have that master's degree. They have more knowledge than they would have had they just had their normal degree level of education. So they've invested in the employee, but they get a more productive employee when they come back. And of course, locating things closer together. Think about any sort of an industry or a business that moves closer to their customer. The customer spends less time waiting, maybe less time driving in the car to get there. That saves time, that saves the environment. It's good for everybody. And then finally, we look at supporting industry clusters under creating shared value. And a cluster basically is a network of firms that produce similar resources. Now, we typically think of clusters as geographically co-located. Think of something like Silicon Valley, where you've got all these tech companies within a very, very short geographic area, and then all the services that support those tech companies, like chip manufacturers, the fancy coffee shops, the co-working spaces, all that stuff to support the software manufacturing. However, with the internet now, clusters don't necessarily need to be geographically co-located, they just need to have a tight working relationship. So you can have a Silicon Valley firm, but does all of their call center outsourcing to India. Now, India is very far from Silicon Valley, but they developed that tight and close working network with each other, and so the cluster of Silicon Valley spans a network distance, does not span a network distance, but it spans a geographical distance. So the main thing that I want you to take away from this very brief discussion of creating shared value is that there are ways to be socially responsible that contribute to your competitive advantage. You do better for your customers, yourselves, and your stakeholders, and you become better than your competitors as well at the same time. That's creating shared value. Corporate social responsibility does not necessarily imply this, and let's talk a little bit about why that might be. Part of it, of course, has to do with social reporting. And we have the triple bottom line report. And the triple bottom line is a way of accounting across 3 different levels of analysis. You've got the financial level of accounting. And of course, that's exactly what you think it is, dollars and cents coming and going, right? Then you've got the social. You know, we are giving money to our local community, and that has some sort of a social value, and we're putting a dollar amount on that. And then the environment. We are doing something good for the environment, and that has some sort of a social value. Think about for a second why having a triple bottom line report and making that information available for public consumption would be a bad thing. Well, the biggest threat to strategy and competitive advantage is imitation. The more competitors know about what you're doing, the more they can copy and imitate it. So if they know, for example, you spend 10% of your budget on social causes and 15% on environmental causes, well, they know already what you have done with 25% of your budget, and it's that much easier to figure out what you're doing with the other 75%. Furthermore, if it's giving you some sort of a special competitive advantage to be nice to the environment or to your communities, they can just copy it and do the exact same thing, and the fact that you're giving no longer becomes a competitive advantage, but becomes an expectation or a norm for peer companies within your given strategic group. So triple bottom line reporting, while it sounds like a good thing for customers, can actually detract from your competitive advantage. A couple kind of key vocabulary terms that go with the triple bottom line report, of course, are transparency, hopefully you can see me. So transparency basically means that a company has social strategies, financial reporting, and processes, and they're totally visible to external observers, or maybe rather the degree to which they are visible to external observers. Of course, you've got sustainability reporting. And sustainability reporting basically means you document and disclose how much your corporate operations conform to the idea of sustainable development, which sustainable development is this kind of economic growth that meets the needs of today without sacrificing the welfare of the social or communities and the environment of future generations. So doing great for today, but not hurting the people of tomorrow. And then, of course, assurance. Assurance is a verification, usually you pay auditors to do this, that the information in a corporate social sustainability report is correct. Now, I'm going to give you some costly errors in CSR implementation, but quite frankly, these are errors. These would be errors on any level of analysis in a firm. Okay? Giving no coherent or systematic thought to CSR. Again, does the CSR actually benefit the company at all, or does it even hurt the communities? There was one automobile manufacturer that's going to remain nameless for the purposes of this discussion, and it was in Detroit, and some of you may know that Detroit's a rather depressed city. And so they wanted to do something nice for the community of Detroit. The CEO of Detroit asked the CSR expert of the firm, aka his wife, what do you think the city of Detroit needs? Well, she happened to like opera. So she advised her husband to go ahead and build a beautiful opera house in Detroit. Now this was an insult to the city and its people. The opera house was, beautiful and everything, but nobody in that city could afford to have tickets to the opera house. So it was just kind of like teasing them the whole time that they were there. It did no good at all. In fact, with the, whatever it was, $20 million that they gave to build that opera house and pay for the orchestra and everything, they'd have been better off just building cars and giving them to the people of Detroit. Okay? Because then the people of Detroit would have at least had the cars. They'd had to go back and pay for the parts later on. But my goodness, you imagine somebody that is down and out and you give them a free car, they would be a loyal customer for life, and they tell all their friends, their kids, their grandkids, the whole thing. It would have been a much better use of the money than just doing an opera house. Another thing is that CSR strategies typically can be reactive, and they don't have anything to do with major social impacts. They don't have anything to do with the company's core competencies or their business strategies. They basically just write a check and fire and forget. And to make matters worse, they may put CSR initiatives within a separate business unit within the firm and there's no oversight at all. So imagine having an employee. You say, you know what, I like you, here's an office, here's $10 million, figure out what to do with it, but I as a CEO, I'm not going to have anything to do with it. I'm not going to look, I'm not going to check, I'm not going to verify. I trust you. You'll do the right thing. How effective do you think that is, really? And of course, the reporting standards for CSR may not be credible. So these are kind of your costly errors. A couple other things that stem from CSR is corporate philanthropy. Philanthropy is basically giving money, property, or work for the welfare of society. And this is the other costly mistake of CSR. Just treating the company as almost like a charity, just giving money to causes without any sort of major break. And a lot of companies, by the way, don't even give that much money out. You can use up to 10% of taxable earnings as a deduction, but most companies don't even give more than 1% away to charitable causes. So it's overall philanthropy in the United States comes from individuals, not corporations. And a couple other things that I would draw attention to. There's another concept similar to philanthropy called strategic philanthropy. It's basically the same thing as creating shared value. It's the idea that you can give money to a charitable cause and in some way it benefits you as a community. Maybe, for example, you donate money to the local elementary school so that workers in that community will be more educated. Cause marketing is another form of strategic philanthropy. So cause marketing is another form of strategic philanthropy, and there's a degree of philanthropy based on the product. So for example, for every box of cookies you buy, the Girl Scouts get some sort of a proportion of it. And so when you buy a box of Girl Scout cookies, you're basically supporting the Girl Scouts. That's a classic example of cause marketing. It does appeal to the conscience of the customer, but in other, not necessarily the Girl Scouts, but in other forms of strategic philanthropy, or cause marketing rather, it can be said that they're just using the suffering of others to promote the sale of a product. I don't know. You'll have to be the judge on that one. So that has wrapped up our implementation of corporate social responsibility and our modules on corporate social responsibility. We've got some more modules. We've got a few more modules coming up. I hope you'll find them interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing you then.